turn this mic off if I need to clear my throat.
You just go like this.
Oh. Okay.
I thought you said no moving.
Can we move the mic or not?
Move your head.
So I can't move this mic from here.
You can move it, but it's just anytime you move it, you're risking it sounding bad. Check.
Man, I was not listening to you at all when you were explaining this beforehand.
I got it.
Okay.
All right. We should be able to check as we're talking. I could see the green up and down because we're a bit far from the. You can also see the lines on the computer.
Can you?
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Rockin'.
Wow.
We're all pretty. Oh, look, mine's way hot. That's too loud.
No, it's fine.
That's better.
Is this the original soundboard that we bought?
Yeah, this is the original mic. Do you remember the original mic was like this big?
It was a USB that plugged into the computer.
Yeah, my brother
And we
Ethan
just
gave us
sat it on
a table like this, and we would talk this far away. And then
I love
we got
that.
this, which shortly after we got this, we had Baron on because there's a fourth port.
Yep. Wow. That's what we can call this, the fourth port.
Wow.
Fourth port.
Very cool. This is the one that we use with Baron.
Mm-hmm. We used this for years, I believe.
Wow.
Well,
Huh.
I certainly did. Because I bought you guys little versions of this.
Right.
Which I still have.
I don't think I have it anymore.
Yeah. So here we are in, where are we?
Maryville, Illinois, undisclosed location, we
Mhm.
could say,
USA.
at our 2022 3 North Hangout.
Mm-hmm. Which has been great so far.
Yeah.
I think so.
What have we done that you've enjoyed?
I really enjoyed the cathedral, this Basilica Cathedral in St. Louis. And I got up quite a bit earlier than you guys today. And I was like, I almost want to go there again while they're sleeping and just be back. I was picturing myself in it again this morning as I was praying. It was lovely. I've never been there. I'm glad we went there on your suggestion. I also enjoyed the steak dinner and watching Babette's Feast.
Yeah. It was a super day.
That was a great day.
It was a super duper day.
Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed the funeral as well.
Oh, yeah,
Love your
Jerry. Mm-hmm. For the listeners, I were at my parish and they celebrated Mass for a funeral for a parishioner yesterday, which was great.
It was really great.
Yeah, so I think you were the one that spurred this idea. One day you just said, hey, let's do a group hangout.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put this on the calendar.
Mm-hmm.
That's in our bylaws, though, I think, of what we've established, at least through oral tradition throughout the years, is once a year hangout.
Yeah, we should be in person.
Yep.
Which we were last year.
Right. So this is, we're hanging in, actually, because we spent a week in Santa Barbara
That's true.
last May. That's almost
true.
been a year ago.
And then the year before that, well, I guess we all would have been together. Or did we do another Santa Barbara retreat?
No, that was the first time the three of us were out there.
That's
together.
true.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. But we've been pretty consistent with it.
Fairly.
Which we could say the same about the podcast in general.
Mm-hmm.
A fair amount of consistency.
This is, man, it's just weird being together, podcasting again. How long has this been? 6 years?
Man, I don't know.
Man, dude, I was on STL, and I've been a priest for, it'll be 8 years in May. So like 6 to 7 years ago, probably.
Wow.
Holy cow. The last time I remember us doing something like this was when we visited you in Blue Island.
Yeah.
Oh, we did do that.
And we had a little cast
You're
up
right.
in the rectory.
Uh-huh.
I think that was right before deacon ordination. Were we back from the Holy Land?
Yeah, maybe.
Because I think we talked about being ordained.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. Yeah.
Boy, this is really fun for the new listeners to just kind of take a trip down memory lane. This is your first time with us.
Yep. This soundboard. Well, it didn't start at all. But it takes me back. I'm flooded with nostalgia right now.
We should probably all sign it.
Yeah. It's kind of a hunk of junk. As I was setting things up and testing it, I do have my doubts as to whether this will work or not, but
Should we ditch it? The steak dinner last night was great. That was very good food. And followed up by Babette's Feast was fantastic.
yes.
I was praying this morning with just the speech of General Lorenz.
Mm-hmm.
That was your first time. Like, was that the most moving part of the movie for you?
Well, as I mentioned after we watched it last night, I was kind of waiting for the shoe to drop for the moving part. And I think I had heard enough about it that I think I saw everything coming. The most obvious thing was like the reconciliations among the members as they enjoyed the festivity of the meal. They started to kind of like, not before they even allowed themselves to really enjoy the meal, they were enjoying some of the fruits of it, which was the ease and fellowship. And but yeah, I think what I was praying with this morning that moved me was your comment about, I think, the book, her sitting on the butcher block all pale and sweaty from all the work she'd done preparing the meal, which there was a scene like that. She wasn't as much like exhausted in the movie, but she is at the end of the meal kind of like washing her hands or wiping her brow or something. And just the serenity and the generosity of her sacrifice was really moving to me. And in her femininity, you know, it was a different image of Christ than you're used to. It's not this bloody crucified man. It was this kind of tired but happy woman, you know, to have given what she was able to give, her art, you know, but that it was somehow a participation in the same kind of sacrifice and had the same fruit. And then them around the well at the end saying that the stars are near tonight, that feeling of, you know, it's so subjective, but also objective, like our podcast.
Exactly like our podcast.
Objectifying the subjective. But that the stars are very near, and that it was an epiphany what they had, and that what the general says at the end, that all things are possible, whereas years prior, in the sort of in the grayness of it and his worldview that was not to say pessimistic, but at least limited, constrained. He thought there's just certain things that are impossible, and so he had to make a choice, and he chose his career. And coming back to that same place and seeing God there in the form of this festive meal, this leisure, and these relationships of love that, even though he'd been apart from her for so long, he realized he'd been with her every night, and he would be dining with her every night, even though only spiritually, you know. So there was just a hope and a joy in the story and in the movie. Everything is grace, and like God is good, and that means that our attitude can be one of gratitude. Oh gosh, I can't believe I said that.
Did you say that?
Whoa, hang on. Like, I've never heard you say that.
Did you say that in sincerity?
Well, I was surprised by the rhyme, and then I realized that that's that thing.
That's the thing.
An attitude of gratitude.
Attitude of gratitude. I'm grateful for what you just said.
So
and
I think
I'm
I made
glad
my
that it's
point.
on the camera.
Yeah.
Man, I hope this works.
But those are my thoughts.
I like that, man. That notion of the stars are nearer tonight. I like that a lot. I kind of felt that I don't know, you just kind of, I have no other words or kind of stories for that specific vocab around it, but I know the feeling, and I can go to certain evenings when that holds of like the stars are nearer. Last night was kind of one when we were hanging out on the porch and you were jamming on the guitar with the fire. It's like, wow, this is good.
Mm-hmm.
This is really good.
I felt it walking around the city. I felt it in the cathedral for sure. I felt that line, "All things are possible." I was struck in the cathedral by the possibilities in the world. That, like, when you see something like that, like those mosaics in the ceilings, after having, you know, worked, I mentioned this to you guys in the car, but having worked very modestly for not that long on that chapel, but how much attention you could put on something, and just being happy with how it turns out, something artistic, something for the glory of God. But then to see what human beings have done in the past. And I've never been to Rome. Everybody says that, you know, St. Peter's Basilica and stuff. Like, you see some of the wonders of human creativity and achievement, and you're like, what must heaven be like? You know, that that's the attitude of gratitude I'm talking about, is that, like, the reality is actually greater than what you perceive to be reality.
Yeah.
That you're always shooting too low of what actually is given to us and what the future holds. And so like honestly, just driving around without a smartphone yesterday, and you just kind of telling me like, I think it's this street, and then finding ourselves in the old cathedral parking lot, and then looking up at the arch, and I didn't plan on seeing the arch that day, and I was honestly in my mind always ready to be disappointed by the arch whenever I finally saw it, and I was actually like really charmed by it, standing that close. And then we weren't able to get in the trams because the trams had just ended, but it was like fine because then we just went and got a steak. And
the arch, thanks be to God, we can see it's very solid.
Yeah,
it's not going anywhere.
I was pleased with that.
It's not hollow.
No,
that would be a problem. It seems to be well made, and that's the Three Dogs North. That's it.
We can put our stamp of approval that it probably won't fall over.
Yeah.
As amazing as that is, because it's pretty tall and thin.
It's huge.
It's very tall. It's very tall.
It's absolutely gimungo. Yeah, and it is. Whoever thought of that idea, good for you, man. How did that come into your mind? The gateway to the west.
Just a big arch.
Gimungo arch.
Well, all the weird modern little like show off things, like the Eiffel Tower, the Ferris wheel, and the arch. Like, are there any others? The Empire State Building is kind of one. Wasn't that around that era? Well, it's more like the 20s, I think.
I don't know.
We could look at the chronology cards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But there's something kind of unnecessary about those three things: the Ferris wheel, the Eiffel Tower, and the St. Louis Arch. It's just kind of like architectural wonders for the sake of architectural wonders. It wasn't a basilica or a tomb like the pyramids.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the things, and this is to get to the Babette's Feast, and I think it's around the similar idea that things are always greater than we can initially perceive, which means that when we perceive something that really truly is great, like it does bring that even greater realization that, like, oh my gosh, then if this is so amazing, then heaven must be just truly unbelievable. But the thing that always moved me about Babette's Feast, and particularly the character of Babette, is she embodies that in a lot of ways, that she is tremendous for the people of the town and the people of the village. They love her. And she changes the village, she changes the sisters, but they have no clue how great she is.
Yeah.
But the whole movie, she's this stately, dignified, beautiful, holy, happy woman, and all they see is the fruit of it. And then
like ever since Babette got here, we have more money.
We have more money. People are happier. People are eating
old people
better.
that they care for are getting better food.
Yeah, like they're praising God. They're thanking God for Babette because of all the things that, because she has just made life sweeter for them, like literally, but also figuratively. But then I think the thing that always moves me so much is at the end is the sister sees who she is, but then also sees that Babette also gave all of that up for them. And so it's like both the realization of her greatness and her beauty, that you see it in the sister, sees it like, oh my gosh, we've had this unbelievable woman with us the whole time. And we stuck her in this back room and she serves us dinner and we don't even know what we have. And she gave it all away for us. And so it's like a double whammy realization there. And I guess
that's the sister who is also an artist.
Who's the singer?
The singer.
Yeah. Yep. And I think she refers to Babette as an artist in that scene.
And she says the same lines that
Pepin said to her.
Yep. That Pepin said to her, that in reference to cooking, when he was talking about singing, but that the angels, you would enchant the angels with your cooking. And
which even the moment, it's interesting that they end on that, because it's a very similar, it's the same thing that the general articulates, because that sister chose not to give her gift away. And so in that moment, though, it was like still all things are possible because she can give that to Babette in the moment.
Yeah.
I don't know, just that whole image of the meal. I mean, it always sticks with me every time I see the movie. But I like that line or that notion, like what must heaven be like? And I don't know. I mean, something like that. The stars are certainly nearer. Um, I don't know how you.
I actually felt it yesterday, just praying my holy hour in your church, and then the funeral and everything. I mean, the story of Jerry, that he got the last rites and then died basically seconds later.
Mm-hmm.
Those sort of things just make you, how can you not think of heaven and what comes next? And hearing his daughter give that obituary on the things he enjoyed in this life, I felt very appreciative of the things in their simplicity, like hunting and his barbershop chorus and his kids and grandkids and the Knights of Columbus and this town. And, I don't know much about it except through you. I,
Yeah,
know
he
that.
got married in the church 72 years before he was buried in it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And did they say he was the first wedding there?
Mhm.
Wow, that's
Yep.
so cool.
And all of that is good. And it's awesome that it happened, but in a way it's just a shadow. Like in that context, and your homily said this well, I think it was not just a celebration of life, but a calling down of God's mercy on Jerry in this moment to welcome him into the kingdom. And sometimes I've done funerals where it didn't feel that open to transcendent. It didn't feel like the stars were that close, that it was just kind of, yeah, she liked to cook and her kids, and, he was always a little league coach, or, but it wasn't like those things were a means to, like, you enjoyed them for the sake of this other good,
Mm.
which was their source and goal. It was more like we weren't creative enough or imaginative enough to see how that was connected. But just, and again, I don't know the guy, I never even met him, but his funny T-shirts and the fact that he was faithful at mass and talked to you, and like there was a coming together of his particular quirky humanity with the fact that, yeah, in the end, what's most essential about this guy is not his T-shirts, is but that he's a soul loved by Christ, and he believes in him and will go with him when he gets called. There's almost like an alacrity of his spirit that in the moment he received the mercy of the sacraments, all right, now it's time to go. Like, I can just leave it all. As much as I loved this place, I'm ready to go. And that's what it felt like in Babette's feast. They are so concerned, like, we're not going to say anything about the meal because enjoying life is dangerous. It can lead you astray.
Mm.
You can become an addict to the things of the world, and you can, commit adultery and all the things that they were arguing about. It was like such a tight grip on their lives and on their spiritual, like, holiness, that it was just in a relaxing and an enjoyment, which of course is riskier. Like, you can become obsessed and idolatrous
Mm-hmm.
with the created goods. And I found myself, even as the kind of mousy one, tasted the water and she's like, yeah, no. And then she just like takes a big chug of wine. Like, that could be the kind of thing where it's like, I've never even allowed myself to enjoy this. And now I just, but in the context of the whole meal, it was social. It was not selfish. It wasn't idolatrous. It was festive in the best sense. So, in that loosening and that like, you don't have such a tight grip on your soul. Like, you're trying to manage it yourself. You can just allow yourself to be open to the transcendence. And then when it's over, it's just over, like nobody wanted to stay at the meal forever because we just got to keep eating. Like, this food was so good, we just got to keep eating it because it's what we're made for. They realize, like, it signaled to them a higher good, and they get out there and they start singing and looking up at the sky. That, to me, that's so beautiful. That's humanity. What God made us for was to enjoy him.
Yeah, and the general, I think he says as much when he's talking about at the time in the movie, the hidden chef of Café Anglais, and he says that she could turn a regular meal into a an
Love
encounter.
affair.
Yeah, like a love affair, and you can see everybody gets really
Yeah,
uncomfortable.
they get really uncomfortable.
They're like, "Oh my gosh, what is this guy talking about?"
That's exactly what we're worried about.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's exactly the problem. But then they actually enter into it kind of unbeknownst to themselves,
Mm-hmm.
in spite of themselves. Like they would rather not do that. And then in entering into that, it liberates them. There's a massive freedom that occurs. Yeah, and I know we've talked about it before to some extent, but I think you use the phrase "just let the day die,"
Mm-hmm.
and that tendency to want to come back for more. Like even I noticed when they were cleaning up the table, um, if I was cleaning up the table after a great meal like that, I would look for little scraps and be like, "Ooh, just a little bit more of this, just a little bit more of this tasty food," and to kind of stay there, or to get more of it. But to have that freedom, and Rob, I think you actually do a really good job of this, but just naturally like, "Oh, that was great. Now I can move on," kind of a thing, and just kind of like letting that go and not needing to come back for more like that. There's a great freedom in that. And I know that that's something that I'm not good at. Like coffee's good, so I'm gonna get some more coffee, and then some more coffee. And it can manifest itself in all these different ways. But um, yeah, that move from this is not the end in and of itself, but there's actually something more, that they move out of the room into the open space and into the heavens to see that is.
And even the fact that it's December 15th and it's not snow, they comment a couple times about it's probably going to snow tomorrow, and then somebody at the end says it might not snow this whole winter.
Yeah,
it made me think of Narnia and the witch's spell, the eternal winter. Like there's almost a springness to the dying of the year. I don't know if that's intentional.
How am I good at what you were talking about?
I mean, since the years of knowing you, I just think that I have to be very intentional about choosing when to start something and to stop something, because if not, then I'll get caught up in the thing itself. And it seems like that's something that you just do really organically and really well, is enjoying the thing in front of you, and then we can just move on. And I'm like,
And you also share it, like your steak last night. Like, oh, I'm done eating the steak, but I would like to share some of it with you guys. Or the fact that you have all this nice whiskey and it's not all drunk. It's there, ready to share.
That it's there. That's
yeah, you're good at that.
Yeah, you're great. And I know the right thing to do, and I can choose to do it, but it doesn't. It has to be a choice. And it always seems like for you, it's like, and maybe you're just really good at putting on airs or whatever, but
I get it honest. I'm thinking of a story. I don't know if I've told you guys this before, but this is 3 or 4 years ago, and we found a couple bottles of Weller's bourbon. You guys ever had Weller's? It's good. It's like I think it's a wheat bourbon. It's made by the same distillery that makes Buffalo Trace, and it's not as hard to find as like the top tier kind of rare bourbons, but it's like if you find a bottle, definitely buy it. And we found a couple bottles, and so like I bought one, and then my mom bought one for my dad. And I still remember when we got home, my dad was still working, and he got home and he was pumped that we had gotten him a bottle. And I had like already like put mine with my stuff to come back to Maryville, and was like planning. I mean, this was in the spring, and I was like planning on saving it for like Christmas. So I knew like where I was going to hide it pretty much. And immediately, like without thinking about it, my dad just opened it and poured 2 big glasses. And I was like, I was like, man, are you sure you don't want to like save it or, something? He was just like legitimate was, what are you talking about? Like, why wouldn't we enjoy this right now? Because it's here in front of us. It was a good lesson for me.
There's something to be said for both things. I think the self-control and also one of the things I was thinking as the movie was progressing and the meal was progressing in the movie, the bottles back there, that at one point she goes, just leave the bottle out there with him. Like why hang on to this stuff? There can be a certain excess. I was also worried like, oh, is the carriage driver going to like drink all the nice champagne?
Mm.
And it's not going to be, but there was a moment where I realized like, oh, she's enjoying that he's enjoying this. It's not like he's secretly sneaking drinks and food, but she makes him like one of the little quails. And every time he says it's good, she's like, yeah, it is. That there's no fear in her that there's not going to be enough,
Mm. Mm-hmm. It was a certain. I'd like your guys' thoughts, and this I don't have much like formulated on it, but there's like a certain hierarchy that's required for the movie to be as beautiful as it is. Like even the culture of Babette, but like they needed the general
Mhm.
in the meal to be able to communicate it,
Mm-hmm.
like both to the people, but then for the person watching it as well.
Mm.
And I don't know, there was just something like even in it too of like the fact that there was a couple people back there in the kitchen with her that like weren't even at the table but still got to join in the meal. So I've thought about that of like I don't know. I think that's something that we don't talk about very much at all because we don't know how to like really articulate it in today's language. Maybe that isn't without fear of being offensive of like, no, there is like a hierarchy in the governance of the church
Mm-hmm.
that will be, I think, flipped on its head in heaven in a lot of ways. I've told people, I tell the Newman students this a lot, that my favorite description of the priesthood, I think it was a Father Mike Schmitz thing, but my favorite description of the priesthood is God's garbage men. And he talks about it in a talk he gave on confession. And he's like, that's how you think of a priest, is like that's just blue collar God's garbage man
Mm-hmm.
that you like, take the garbage to and he'll take care of it
Mm-hmm.
then. And so it's like the structure of the church is hierarchical. I mean, even still today, like the governance of the church is through like the bishops and like his priests. And I think there's ways that are very much Holy Spirit driven to like provide like collaboration and just bringing in different gifts and all of that. But that's at least my understanding of like the governance is still based on the episcopacy, throughout the world. And but there is a sense of like that could have without a doubt a feeling of this like superiority, even though it's not intended to. But then like in heaven, that will somehow be flipped of like, no, that's just God's garbage man there. That make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I kind of think of it the opposite though. I think the garbage men are going to be wearing crowns in heaven. It's not so much that like, oh, it's revealed that we enjoyed Ruth's Chris here, but we're actually blue collar up there. It's that all of us are lifted up, and the hierarchy does not push anyone down.
That's why I think it's so hard to like talk about and articulate.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Yeah.
I think we're saying very similar things.
Right. Yeah, I had a thought. One was a joke that I think I heard years ago, that a waitress asked if these guys at a table were priests. And they said, yeah, how did you know? And she said, because priests always have the most expensive meals but wear the cheapest clothes.
Oh, gosh,
Which was us last night.
That was us last night.
Oh man.
Yeah, I was wearing my Forest Service hoodie that I had literally slept in the night before at a steakhouse. But yeah, no, the hierarchy. I mean, the general's role in that. It made me think of, as we were talking about last night, and as you're talking today, that the need for this person to lead them in the enjoyment of the meal, and even the fact that he's the only one that's not wearing black at this birthday party. He's wearing these colorful, his military uniform with his feathered cap as he comes in on the horse and carriage. I thought of the priesthood that way, that we are both like the hosts of the meal in a sense, like in persona Christi Capitis. Like we are standing in for Christ, the head of the church, the shepherd, the one who gives his body as the feast. but we also participate in it. We receive it, you know,
Mhm.
and therefore show, like, even the way he eats the bird, he starts with the little head and
Mhm.
stuff, you know. I've been in situations where I'm like, I don't know how to eat this. I would like you to, or even ordering at a place, like you
Mhm.
know, you're somebody's guest and they're like, come on, you order first. And you're like, show me,
Yeah.
like, what's acceptable
Yeah.
to order.
How do
And
I pronounce
yeah.
this?
So the fact that he's there and he doesn't kind of let the really dour energy of these people's communal commitment to not enjoy this meal get him down. He just enjoys it, you know, and he shows them how in
Mm.
a not unself-conscious way. He doesn't like say, "Oh, I've been to a restaurant that has this fancy," you know, and make you feel like you're an uncultured swine. Um, but unself-consciously enjoys it, and therefore it gives everybody else permission to enjoy it. Um, it's harder with the mass, which all of this is, of course, an image of, and the mass, of course, itself is an image of heaven, communion with the Trinity. Um, but we've been doing this little liturgical tidbits thing at the end of Mass.
Mm.
Our whole thematic goal of the year is liturgical excellence and helping people make our liturgies really beautiful, but also helping people understand, appreciate, and participate in them. And one of the things is it's really hard to get people to do the responses. And some of it is maybe you just don't know them, you know, or you don't know, no one's given you permission to like actually try this and say it. So going through at the end of Mass, just doing like a 1.5, 2 minute explanation of like the Lord be with you and with your spirit, or the gesture I done on Sunday, the gesture for the gospel and what it means and how to do it. Because sometimes I think people just need a docent to show them this is how you enjoy this, and trust me that when you start to do it a little bit more actively and you give yourself permission to do it, you will find yourself carried away by it. But that to me is a beautiful image of the priesthood. It's not simply like I get what you mean by the garbage man thing. I don't like that because it's sort of, it feels disenchanting to me. That we're just garbage men. I think that's why I say it's reverse of that. The garbage men are actually princes. You know, it's not that the princes are actually just garbage men. Do you know what I mean?
I think so. Yeah.
That the reality is actually more transfigured than it's there's a humility to it, and there's a ordinariness and a humanity to what we do, and that is true. But in the measure that it's more human and more real, it's actually more transcendent. You know, it's more heavenly, and which can be also humiliating. Like the general is very humbled at the end of the meal, even though he is the stately one who's kind of given this thing its flavor. He takes his dour little aunt in the carriage and drives away.
Mm.
And he's an old, washed up general, you know, that kind of wasted his life on pointless honorifics.
Mm.
And he should have stayed with this lovely woman. But he realizes that all is grace and that everything's possible. And reality is actually, the truth is actually more wonderful than what is apparently true. Anyway, that's how I see it.
In this amazing world of ours, all things are possible. Yeah, I do agree with the symbolism of the general as being a docent, like the priestly figure that teaches, but then also in participating in the feast invites other people to enjoy and delight in the feast as well. Like that's really what he does. He's not just a sideline teacher, but he's a player with them. He's in the group. Um, yeah, but then he also leads them up in the vertical way. So he brings everybody in together, um, which is that's the kind of the priest is with the people type situation, and he really truly is there among them. But then he also elevates them, not to the exclusion of them, but in the inclusion of them, so that they can actually dine and enjoy the things with him. Um, so I definitely agree with that. I'd ask this for looking at the movie and the meal through that lens, the kind of hierarchical lens. How would you see the sisters?
Mm.
What role would you kind of have the sisters play there? Because I noticed that they're at the heads of the table,
Yeah.
and they're also the ones they're the community leaders there, and they do have an important part to play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I don't know, how would you see them, because I haven't thought about that.
I don't know either, and that's cool because even like them being at the head of the table is important, and like also the reverence shown by like even by the general to them,
Mm-hmm.
and their
Mm-hmm.
like holiness of life and their
Mm-hmm.
sacrifice, and like he mentions at the beginning of the meal that their father's writings are like some of the favorites of the queen.
Uh-huh.
That he's like had this opportunity to meet the queen apparently because he's this great general, but like their father's writings are like influential to the queen, and so he's extremely reverential
Right.
to them,
Right.
not just because has been in love with the one. So I don't know where you would put them.
Well, maybe, and this would be to the back to the cathedral. Maybe they play the role of the virgins as these consecrated women to Christ, to God. That it's amazing because when you look at each of the figure, they're all essential.
Yeah.
Everybody's essential.
Oh yeah.
Without the sisters, that doesn't happen. Without the general, it doesn't happen.
Right. So I think maybe, and this is helping me in what I was getting at, but like maybe instead of hierarchy, like just order in general is required.
Mm-hmm.
But that's probably a better way to say it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which order is hierarchical, to your point, but it's not. It doesn't squish anybody. There's the
Exactly. It's not like a suppression.
Yeah.
If it's correctly ordered.
Yes, it lifts everyone up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's what maybe even to the notion of like God's garbage men of like that's not like derogatory in any way. Like that's that's an honorific thing is how I'm trying to say it.
Right. Right, which is I mean, that's a big thing that Peterson talks about, is that he doesn't defend hierarchies. He simply states that they are essential in nature. They exist in almost every form of categorizing things. They're always going to fall into some sort of an ordered hierarchical process.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way that the world unfolds itself in the animal kingdom, mammalian kingdom, in human
society.
order, and the way that everything's are structured.
Mm-hmm.
Even Protestant churches will have some sort of a hierarchical structure. I mean, even their little community has some hierarchical structure, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's oppressive or that it's a power structure. That's kind of like that Marxist idea that all hierarchies are in some way formulated for the oppression of other people for the most powerful. But then maybe we could say something like, that's what Christ reveals is like a hierarchy of love. There's a hierarchy of grace, which is in the order of grace. It's the reverse. That's always how I heard it with the church, was that it's not a pyramid, it's an upside down pyramid, which means that the highest are actually the lowest, that they can serve and support everybody else. And so then the priesthood is really meant to give your life away for the good of everybody else.
Right.
And I think that's more like, that's still hierarchical, but it's in service of the sacrifice of love for everybody else.
I think it's hierarchical, like the body is hierarchical, and it's not in other words, it's not a separation. There's order lifts everybody up because it's alive. An organism is ordered in the measure that it's a living thing. But a club or a set, a collection of like things isn't alive. It's just there. It's just this dead static thing. But as soon as something is alive, there's a foot, there's a hand, there's a head, there's a stomach. It has parts that work in concert together. And so, the church is hierarchical, but that, like to your point about what Peterson says, that's just a statement. That's just a descriptive fact. It's not prescriptive at all. And to challenge that is to just fight nature, and you can't do it. You'll always lose. Anarchy or whatever. The fact that reality is broken and disordered, and there is injustice and oppression in the world, that's also descriptive.
Yeah.
So it's not that hierarchies caused oppression. It's that hierarchies exist and oppression exists. And so,
and people can take advantage of hierarchical structures,
of course,
to use their positions of power, and that's of course not good.
But I think more the reality that we're getting at is the not just the hierarchical, but the, I want to say, spousal. That the church is both the body of Christ and the bride of Christ, and in the liturgy you see both things happening simultaneously. That the priest stands in the person of Christ, the head of the body, the persona capitis, but there's also the bridegroom, and the church is the bride, and that's the call responses and stuff. The Lord be with you and with your spirit. That there's this distinction without separation going on. That in becoming one flesh in his humanity, the marriage of God and man in Christ, in the banquet, in the Eucharist, especially our reception of the Eucharist and becoming one flesh with God, there's this epiphany. And that's what's miraculous about Babette's feast and leisure in general in the Pieper sense, that when we are truly worshiping, it's God doing this, is accomplishing something in us, this ordering or reordering or restoring of proper relationship with him and then with each other. And that's where that reconciliation and stuff just starts bubbling up almost naturally, is that, without the aid of grace, we cannot create this festivity. We're like Aaron and the gold rings melted down to a calf and having this revelry at the bottom of the mountain. We're just like stuck in this pleasure circle that results in violence and oppression and hurting each other because there's not enough. And so I've got to drink all the wine and eat the leftovers and keep, steal what you have to make it mine. But there's this abundance in the sharing, and it's Babette's sacrifice, but it's Christ in her doing this, accomplishing this thing, that now they're able to just like relax and receive, and there is an orderedness to the table, and the fact that they're there in their places and stuff, they're disposed to receive reality and its goodness. But that's not something we can ever accomplish. We can't just that's why I think we resent certain forms of liturgical nonsense where let's just hold hands and pretend like everybody's getting along.
Yeah.
Rather than let's plug into transcendence and reverence for the mystery.
Yeah.
Which actually allows, that's the thing. If you call that proper order, then that's also the thing that a fruit of it can be spontaneous and authentic worship.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. It's not a detail that they give you in the movie, but it's in the book of Babette's Feast, where the general comments to some effect later that the speech that he gives, he doesn't know where it comes from. It wasn't something he had formulated. Yeah. He was just able to.
The Spirit spoke through him.
He just stood up and spoke. And it is interesting. I mean, that's where it's all contingent on freedom. I mean, either whatever you're talking about in that. I mean, back to that story of my dad and the bottle of Weller's whiskey, and I think why it stuck out to me at the time is because my brain lends itself to, and I know this sounds weird, but I mean, I'll think so far in advance sometimes in an ordering of if I score a really good bottle of whiskey as a surprise, it's March, and it would not be weird for me to say this is perfect. I can take this to Christmas and I'll put it back. And yeah, I mean, but there can fall into a lack of freedom in that as well.
Your house is very ordered, and there are little surprise cool things like little helicopters and cabinets. And
that's true.
Mario Kart, and
there's that truck over there.
I benefited from your saving things and keeping
yeah,
because you're also not guarded with it. I remember in seminary, you just being yeah, it's an afternoon. Let's have a whiskey. Let's have a bourbon. You break out. You have the little big ball of ice in your freezer.
Man.
And
I forgot about that.
I just wouldn't have that around.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm sure there is lack of freedom, but I think our lack of freedom is more that if one is good, more is better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm much more conscious of guarding myself from enjoying things at all, because I will why I have a dumb phone, because I'll just, it's great having this high powered device in my pocket all the time, but it's also just, I won't do anything else.
Right.
Unless I'm forced to.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is really great. That's why it's perfect that you host. Cause it's I mean, selfishly, like we get to show up and just enjoy all of this planning and order
Yeah.
that you facilitate super duper well. And I mean, it's very familial as well. That with the meal is very familial. That hierarchy is very familial.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the order of grace and in the order of love, that
And what could be more hierarchical than the family?
right,
Sure.
right, and yet again, it's like it's just
Even the dog is happy to have his place, though. Like I remember
it just is that way.
yeah.
That it's just describing the way that families exist,
Mm.
and all of them are essential.
Yeah.
It's like if one person of the family wasn't there, it would not be the same.
Right.
Yeah.
We need everybody here, and everybody has a part to play.
Mm-hmm.
100%, a necessary part to play.
Yeah, that reminds me, I don't know if this will be a tangent, but something that you said several years ago that has always stuck with me, Bisk, was the maybe it was around that, like all the studies that came out of like how few people even in the pews believe in the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, or just about like mass attendance in general, something along those lines. And you said something to the effect of like the tragedy here is not like the institutional change that this will like probably make necessary of like what does this look like, and not doom and gloom, but like, man, 30 years from now it's going to look way different if no one's going to mass who's under 40, of all of that. But your point is very simple, but the tragedy there was not that, but simply that those people weren't in the pews. Because like the familial thing, it's not okay if they're not there.
Right. Yeah. It's we look at through this vampirism lens, like, oh man, we're going to miss all these constituents and customers to get their tithe or their attention or their membership to rationalize our existence. But rather, the church exists precisely to give this gift. We are Babette, and they're not at the feast because they're like, yeah, it's not that good.
Yeah.
And to your point, everyone at that table had to be there for the feast to be what it was.
Yeah. And I think it's also that's a lens. And you told a story one time about your gratitude in meeting one person in particular, that it's a lens to understand the Jesus goes after the one and leaves the 99. It's like, no, we need you here.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that there's not like some big pastoral plan that we're looking forward to, that we
like
need
any
to keep.
New person will do just as much as any other new person.
We need to keep our constituents and our customers around.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's like, no, I miss you.
Yeah.
And we need you here, that the family's not the same without you.
And I think people can tell when they're being marketed to versus being invited into a family.
Yeah.
You know,
do you remember the story that I'm talking about?
No. I was wondering.
Yeah, because I'm trying to leave the person anonymous. I think they're actually a listener, but they were with you for maybe a semester, and then
Yeah, I know. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and then had to move and move with family, and I think you said like it was all worth it. Just to you said if I hadn't have been here, then I wouldn't have known this person, and that's just not okay. That's just not acceptable.
Yeah, that's what.
Like I just can't not know
the
this
person. If they listen, I do think we need to veil it, but the person, if they listen, may pick up on it. And I think they know they're very loved.
I thought that's so beautiful. That's like the 99.
The point that I made was that was like an effective movement. That was the first time I was able to say that COVID was worth it.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And it like had this sense of fit and order of and it's not like happiness about how like horrible like it was or anything like that. But it was this notion of like, had it not happened exactly how it happened, I wouldn't have known this person, and I'm not okay with that.
Yeah. That's family stuff. That's what that is. That's family stuff. And another thing to the dinner point and the spontaneity of it, and I think that this is what you're talking about with some of the like liturgical resentment towards aiming at the fruit of good liturgy, aiming at the fruit of an encounter with God rather than aiming at God itself. It's like you're not looking at the right thing. You're not plugged into the right thing. So anytime that we talk about, well, we want to have reconciliation and harmony and justice and inclusivity, like those are all fine things. But if that's your aim, that's not enough.
Right.
That's still not God. And so as good as those things are, it's less than the highest, greatest good, who's the
Right.
person of Jesus Christ. And so ironically, not that you don't focus on those things, but if you plug into the greatest good, then he will take care of all of the rest of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But if you aim at even minor, lesser goods, and this is like Barron talks about this, again, that's a hierarchy of goods.
Mm-hmm.
These are not bad things. It's just not Jesus. And so if you plug into Jesus, he'll take care of all the rest, which is exactly what happens at the meal.
Mm-hmm.
But then when we say, no, everybody hold hands now, and all these other silly, goofy things that we do.
Yeah, imagine if the sisters had just been like, all right, now we're all arguing, but everybody just hold hands. And
They try that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They try it earlier. Let's
Right.
sing a song. Everybody hold hands. And they're
Yeah.
like, nah, screw this.
Right.
They're
Exactly.
arguing.
Screw you,
they're arguing
man.
during the song.
They're
Yeah.
arguing. They can't even sing.
That's
Yeah.
really true. But you know what I think is, and this may be easily misunderstood, but the radical thing about that movie and the general speech in particular is that, yes, it is an either or. Either you aim at God and get the benefits of aiming at God, or you aim at something other than God and you don't even get the thing you're aiming at, which is what you just said.
Yeah.
But what he's also saying is that you'll also get God, like either way, because he will insist on giving himself to you.
Yeah.
And that's what's radical about Christianity, and why some of these more simplistic, like ways of looking at that mystery miss the mark and are unnecessarily reductive.
But the
Well, I had one last part of that thought. Yeah, I was talking to Katie Dornbos, who was a listener, and she was talking about something she was praying with the Ten Commandments, and how she read "You shall have no false gods" as like future tense rather than simply imperative tense, which actually in Spanish it is. The Ten Commandments are like "No matarás," you will not kill. She read it like as a form of a promise that God is saying, "I won't let you have," and you can almost like as I look at that movie and these old fogies, like remembering this pastor and this kind of crusty old sepia tone photograph that they're bowing to as they walk out, or like raising their little port glasses to, they're like ready to let go of the past, even though they're kind of stuck in it and their oldness, and there's a new youth to them in that moment where they're ready to let go. Like God has just helped them let go of things that aren't him, that they've loved for his sake, and have led them to him and having this encounter. But ultimately, like, he's just going to take them away, but for our good, until at some point in our lives, like, we have no choice but to just ask for him and he will give himself to us. So that's, to me, the hope at the end of the movie is not so much like either do this or you don't get it. It's more like he's coming for you and he's going to make a total sacrifice of himself so that you will have joy.
Let go and let God.
In other words.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. Attitude is gratitude. So here's the
Did I do that?
That
was a reference to Family Matters, which you said family stuff, and I thought Family Matters, and then I thought Steve Urkel.
Wow.
Did I do that?
Oh man. This is the speech from the book. This is the Barron's book on the Eucharist that we're like in the book club tonight. But the general says, in our human foolishness and short-sightedness, we imagine that grace is finite. But the moment comes when our eyes are opened and we realize that grace is infinite. Grace, my friends, demands nothing of us, but that we shall await it with confidence and acknowledge it in gratitude. Grace takes us all to its bosom and proclaims general amnesty.
Amen.
It's good. But it's like why that's such a masterpiece of writing and even the film is, and I don't know how to explain this besides showing someone the movie,
Mm-hmm.
but he's not saying that your actions don't matter.
No, yeah, you're right.
That's the only, and like that's
That's why I say it's easy to misunderstand.
exact. It
What I'm saying.
is right because like I besides just saying both things and like letting the tension sit
Mm-hmm.
there is it's not saying that actions don't matter,
Right.
but it is saying that
Or that you're
like
going to go to heaven no matter what.
yeah.
Or anything like that. Yeah, it must be chosen in freedom, and God will insist that we're free. He won't make us receive it.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that we even freely receive it has to be itself a gift, and He's promised He'll give it.
Right. That's the thing.
Yeah, and I think that's why that movie and that book is not propaganda.
Yeah,
It's not propaganda. That it's a work of art, and
Yeah.
you have to actually experience it to understand. Well, to experience it, which it has other messages, but it's not like subliminal messaging or anything like that.
and the
It's
same can be said about almost every part of the St. Louis Basilica except certain parts.
except for certain parts, which shall remain
We'll
unnamed.
let that.
Yeah, and but I think it does have to. You just have to sit in the tension of it, and it's not something that you can just explain, but it does have to be experienced. That's why you just have to watch it or read it.
Would you guys agree with this? Somebody, and I don't have the exact line, but somebody told me recently about their spiritual director. Like one of his big things is, and he's walked with some people through like really, really heavy stuff, like bad things happening. But he said there's this moment that can come with this, I don't know what you call it, if it's like that, if it's just your eyes being opened to the receptivity of grace or whatever it is. But he says like when you say it's better that it happened, like even with like hurts and wounds, and that's kind of the grace of the story of like, yeah, I would go through everything. I say that like that was what was interesting about that story that you brought up was that it was so authentically from my heart in that moment of prayer of like, man, this last year has been like miserable in so many ways, and like have all this transition and hard moments and all of that, and easy answer, it was worth it to know this one like person, like it's better that it happened this way.
I think it's pretty good, guys. We're almost an hour.
No, he asked the question.
Oh, you asked a question?
Yeah.
What'd you ask? I thought we were just saying
Okay.
it was better that it happened.
No, I didn't know what you thought of that.
Yeah. Well,
Oh,
yeah, it made me think of something that you said last night. Is that there are certain moments when you look back and essentially you see sufferings that have been encountered, but then also the grace of Christ has been victorious in it. And those are the crosses that you're actually like, oh my gosh, thanks be to God that I had this opportunity, not just of growth, that's not the right way to put it, but to encounter the victory of Christ and his freedom and to actually live into it now. And that's the same moment as like, oh, I'm actually glad that that cross happened. I'm glad that I was able to actually go through that. Um, and it does seem like, yeah, I don't know what the exact experience is. Eye opening. Maybe it's epiphany. Maybe it's that subjective epiphany that you can see like, oh, God's grace is at work here.
I don't know. I mean, my mind's so analytical that I think, well, could this have been brought about by some other thing? Like, or like I have no regrets because all the mistakes I made led me to this point I'm at today, and this is. But in the big calculation of every possibility and eventuality, every little micro decision, every little micro circumstance, everybody else's decisions, like all the little forces that create the weather of our lives. Who knows why things happen the way they happen? You meet a person because of this or that circumstance. I think you can hold both that I wish evil were not present, and yet I can also say confidently that whatever evil is allowed in God's permissive will is always for some greater good to come about. And it's in assenting to that and saying yes to it out of love and trust that the good will come of it. Like in Babette's story, it's whatever led her to be in this dumpy little coast town. She accepted it out of love, and she learned in a way like how they cook that ale bread and this gross stuff. And like she debases herself and humiliates herself to become these women's servant, and therefore gains their trust, and then they're able to receive this feast. And so all of it's for the good to come about.
Yeah, and I would say that you could have regrets and say, like, I'm grateful that it happened this way.
I would agree. Oh,
Yeah.
for sure.
And I think that's kind of the general's point is, man, I dropped the ball and
I got it.
I got
anyway.
it anyways.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
I
and
think
God's got it.
if you summed up his epiphany is that he wasted his whole life and God gave him what he wanted anyway.
Anyways, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. And so it's like, I don't like the phrase that people will say. It's like, well, I'm grateful for every moment and I have no regrets because it led me to this moment.
Yeah,
You're
I
like,
always balk at that. I just think like, no,
you're like,
how can you
no.
not have regrets?
Yeah, like that's not true.
That's it's very inhuman.
Yeah.
Very inhuman.
That's not. And I get what they're saying. They're trying to kind of give an answer to this tension.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's necessary to answer it that simplistically.
Right.
And that's what grace does. Grace frees you from an either or paradigm. That's the both. And that's the order of grace. That's why the hierarchy is non-competitive, like God. And so then there's that abundance, and it sets everybody free.
Mm-hmm.
We solved it.
That's the grace. That's what he says in the speech. Grace is infinite.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that unfolds itself throughout the meal. Yeah.
I'm confirming he says that. He does. I'm kidding.
He does.
Sorry, I spaced on that. I thought you were summing up what we were saying, not asking what we thought of it.
This is authentic. I don't sum things up, okay? Just to land the plane.
You do the summations.
Yeah, you're our summation guy, okay?
And you're good
I feel
at
like
it.
You just summed it.
That was
a pretty good summation.
As good as it is in the movie, I think I like the book even better. In our human foolishness and short-sightedness, we imagine that grace is finite. But the moment comes when our eyes are opened and we realize that grace is infinite.
Mm-hmm.
Grace, my friends, demands nothing of us, but that we shall await it with confidence and acknowledge it in gratitude. Grace takes us all to its bosom and proclaims general amnesty.
Amen.
Let's end with that.
All right.
Bye.